Thank you all. Let's imagine someone's watching on C-SPAN right now, and they're hearing two sides, if you will, from the chairman all the way over, speaking about how this administration appears to have had a concerted effort to block oil and gas development. And you deny it. But the fact that you deny it suggests that you agree that if we had more production, it could help lower the price at the pump and lower the fuel prices, the air conditioning, the heating prices for the folks at home. Now, that mom who's watching on C-SPAN, wondering how she's going to pay for her gasoline, is wondering who to believe. Because I think it's critical. We apparently all agree that if we increase production, that there might be some positive benefit upon the prices that she's paying at the pump and for her fuel bill. So let me just put up some actions of this administration to kind of, put it out there. If you will, the first week President Biden came in, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, shipping oil from our closest ally down to the Gulf Coast to be processed in an environmentally sensitive way, halted all new oil and gas leasing, killed the 5-year offshore leasing program. Frankly, your administration is populated with people who hate fossil fuel, invalidated Gulf Lease Sale 257, did not appeal, pressured financial markets into abandoning financing for fossil fuel projects. I could keep going. Now, I got 10 up there, I could probably have 20. So when I hear, oh no, we're doing everything possible, but what am I going to believe? My lying eyes, or this is just not making sense to me. And Mr. Boudreaux, when you say that you couldn't go to lease sales because you had to clean up all the uncertainty that had been created by the previous administration along the Atlantic, along Florida, et cetera, we're talking about Gulf Coast lease sales, not the Eastern Gulf, about the Central and Western Gulf. I have a letter here from the governors. It includes the governor of Alaska, but the governors of Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Texas, they want those lease sales. There was no mess to clean up there because it employs tens of thousands of Americans. And so I'd like to submit this for the record, and I assume that it is, even though my chair has stepped out for a second. I see the powers that be nodding their head yes. So the idea that there would be some sort of objection in the Gulf Coast to a lease sale is certainly not held up by these governors. And I think that the chairman's point that you've laid it to the last possible moment to put in the first stage when normally everything else would have been done by the date that you're releasing the first stage is again telling. So for the person who's watching, Madam Secretary, is it more so you've mentioned climate several times, and I know for the administration the concern about emissions is top. Here comes fossil fuel development, here comes lowering the price of gas, and climate is top. Okay, that's a priority, we can accept that priority. Is it more environmentally friendly to develop and produce oil and gas resources off the coast of Louisiana, or is it more environmentally friendly to develop those resources, say, in Venezuela or in another country abroad, in terms of emissions, in terms of climate?
Senator, what I can say is that I think here in our country we care deeply about workers.
But that's not my question. My question is, what has the lowest emissions profile using Louisiana or American workers in the outer continental shelf off the Gulf with American companies and American regulations, or Venezuelan standards and Venezuelan crude?
Senator, I'm not an economist or an engineer or a scientist, but with respect...
I'm almost out of time, and I get a sense that this question is not going to be answered straightforwardly, no offense. There is a national lab which has determined that the emissions profile of developing oil and gas off the coast of Louisiana is the lowest in the world for that oil which is processed in Louisiana. Hold up the second one, please. And yet these are the countries that we are asking to produce oil and gas, as opposed to us with our workers and our lowest standards. Now, this is the crazy thing. If you're concerned about climate, you should be producing in Louisiana. Lastly, Mr. Boudreau, you had mentioned that production is now higher. That's not true in the Gulf of Mexico. In the Gulf of Mexico, relative to when this administration took office, we're down about 300,000 barrels a day in the EIA literature from February. That's a pretty significant decrease, 300,000 barrels a day. Maybe you have something later than what's online with EIA, but this administration's all points assault on American oil and gas production is hurting that person who's watching on C-SPAN at home, it's hurting the jobs being created, and it's hurting the international environment. With that, I yield.
Chairman, can I address the sort of last
Please
point
do,
from
please
Senator
do.
Cassidy? Just in a matter of statistics, in calendar year 2020, there were about 615 million barrels of oil produced in the Gulf of Mexico. In calendar year 21, there were 628 million barrels. And so production, far from, blocking production, we've seen production, both onshore and offshore, increase on public lands during this
Mr.
administration.
Boudreau, can I just respond to that? Because
Please.
that's being a little disingenuous, and it's kind of typical of this conversation. There was a huge decrease when COVID hit. And so you're factoring in that those lowest months when COVID hit, boom, and production fell all over. And now you're saying, but the next year we did better. But we had an artificial low. If you want to look at month to month, in January of 2020, there was 1,988,000 barrels of oil produced per month in the Gulf. And then now, at least February, the latest numbers I have, is 1,615,000. Now that takes out that kind of COVID lull, and it just looks at kind of, okay, economy back, what's happening. Mine seems a more accurate analysis.
I mean, if the hypothesis is that the administration's doing everything it can to block and prevent production, the data doesn't bear that out.
I disagree with that, and I can show my first poster again, but we'll have to agree to disagree.
Senator Kelly.